What's the best way to help poor people escape poverty? Progressives and conservatives have very different answers to this question. But before we explore those answers, let's agree on this. Both progressives and conservatives believe that the government has a moral obligation to help those who, through bad luck or unfortunate circumstances, can't help themselves.
Okay, now I'm a little bit worried because we started off with what's the best way to help poor people out of poverty, but okay.
Here's what a conservative icon, Nobel Prize-winning economist Friedrich Hayek said on the subject.
Is it going to be the three things?
There is
like graduate high school, don't have a kid, get a job or something?
No reason why, in a society that has reached the general level of wealth ours has attained, the first kind of security should not be guaranteed to all. Some minimum of food, shelter, and clothing, sufficient to preserve health and the capacity to work. Whatever the media might tell you, there isn't a conservative out there who would not agree with Hayek's statement. As I've documented in my book, Who Really Cares, when it comes to philanthropy and charitable giving, conservatives actually outgive progressives by a lot.
How do you break down conservative and progressive? And also, I wonder if if the charitable donations, I wonder if that includes donations to church. It might not, but...
Two sides.
Also, this has to be broken out for income as well. There's a lot we'd have to control for here. So firstly, income is important. Let's say the average progressive makes $1,000 a year and the average conservative makes $10 million a year. Then these numbers aren't as important either, right? So it'd be interesting to break this down on income, and then it's also interesting to know if we have, if church contributions are included in this as well, because tithes are a little different, I think, than charitable donations.
Where the two sides disagree is on the role the government plays, not in protecting the poor from poverty, but in lifting them out of it. Here's a disturbing piece of data. On balance, since President Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty programs came fully online in 1966, the poverty rate in America has hardly budged. That rate, as computed by the United States government, was 14.7% in 1966. And today, it's 13.5%. The rate has fluctuated a few points up and down over the decades. The net result is just 1 percentage point of progress. And this is after the government has spent...
So I've learned a lot of interesting stuff on data in my immigration studies because of how complicated data are and the importance of having like, I don't know if you'd call a control a counterfactual or something, but let's say, for instance, let's say that we're measuring the median income in a city, okay? Let's say that we implement some policy. Let's say that the median income is, I'm just making up numbers, we'll say 50K. Let's say that we implement some policy. And then let's say like 8 years later, let's say that the median income is here, okay? We'll mark this 5 years. So like a question might be, well, was this a successful policy? Well, if we measure it, doesn't really seem like it was a good policy at all. It didn't really do anything. But we don't actually know that by just one point of data. What we have to do is we have to use control cities that are of roughly equivalent like socioeconomic conditions to figure out if this policy was good or bad. So for instance, let's say that we had this, but let's say that we plotted out a few control cities that were roughly comparable, and let's say that we found out that they did this, right? Well, if we had like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other cities that we plotted out that did this, and then we look at a policy that we enacted right here, well, now all of a sudden, our policy is really good. We're not necessarily comparing the growth from A to B. We might be looking at the difference between like other types of cities that have similar conditions. And much the same, on the other point, maybe other cities did this, right? Maybe other cities had this kind of growth. And now you're looking at your policy and it's like, well, the policy didn't do much. Well, actually it did. It did a lot. It had a very detrimental effect on your city, Having controls for social studies, for social experiments, I shouldn't say experiments, I guess it would be studies, right? For social research is really, really, really important. How did this apply to immigration? Oh, because it's really important to ask the question, because people like Borjas or Card debate like all day, like, how did this relate to immigration? Because when you're studying the impacts of immigrants on native wages, you can't just look at when the immigrants were here, what happened. You have to compare it to the rest of the country as well. It's really, really, really important to have these control cities to compare your data sets to. Some studies can be made or broken. Actually, this is true of every discipline. This is actually true of every single scientific discipline, not just the social ones. But like a lot of these studies can be made or broken just based on methodology. Do you have good controls? How do you get controls for national data? So you need to talk to like
Hello.
an economist or something to like figure out exactly how to do it. But my understanding is like, let's say that I test some policy in Omaha, some new wage policy in Omaha. If I want to find out how that wage policy works, what I might do is I might pick out like 6 or 7 other cities. So maybe I compare Omaha. Let's say that it's similar to like St. Louis, Minneapolis, Kansas City. I would pick out other cities similar to Omaha, and then I would track like the groups of the population that I would expect to be impacted by said policy between all the different cities to see if there was some growth that happened in Omaha that didn't happen in the other cities, and then try to like draw like causal links that way. That would be like the goal.
I guess people were conspirizing that it was because it was at another Twitch streamer or some
Yeah,
shit.
that's the people's conspiracy, but that was never officially stated.